When dealing with a narcissist, one of the most powerful actions you can take is to remove the emotional fuel they rely on. Narcissists thrive on attention, positive or negative. They want reactions, responses, explanations, outrage, tears, confusion, or defensiveness. To them, any emotional response means they still have access to your mind and your heart. That access is what keeps them feeling superior, significant, and in control. When you become emotionally cold, neutral, and unreactive, it disrupts their entire power structure. Narcissists depend on supply, which is the validation, attention, and emotional energy they take from others. They don't just enjoy it, they need it. Their ego is fragile, despite their outward confidence. They constantly seek signs that they still matter in your life, that they can still influence how you feel, or that they can still pull you back in whenever they choose. When you begin withdrawing your emotional energy, they start feeling the absence of that supply like a withdrawal. It destabilizes them in a way that arguments or confrontations never could. Going emotionally cold doesn't mean being rude or cruel. It means being unavailable, unbothered, and unemotional. It means not allowing them to create chaos inside you anymore. It means removing the reactions they use as proof of their importance. Emotional coldness is powerful because it communicates something they cannot ignore. You no longer see them as significant enough to affect you. A narcissist expects you to respond to everything they do, especially when they provoke you. They expect you to explain yourself, defend yourself, and justify your feelings. They want you to chase clarity, closure, or understanding. They want you to feel anxious or guilty. When you stop participating in that cycle, they lose their usual tools of manipulation. They don't know how to handle someone who refuses to feed their ego. Emotional coldness also removes the hooks they depend on, every reaction you used to give them. Anger, confusion, tears, frustration acted like a hook that pulled you back into their orbit. When you become calm, detached, and emotionally flat, those hooks fall away. The narcissist cannot anchor themselves to your emotions anymore, and that loss of control deeply threatens their self-image. They begin to sense that their influence over you is fading, and that realization often leads to panic or desperation on their part, even if they hide it behind arrogance. To go emotionally cold, you must first detach from the belief that their behavior is about you. Nothing they do is personal. It is a reflection of their internal emptiness. When you internalize this truth, their actions no longer feel like attacks. They feel like patterns. You stop reacting because you stop taking their behavior personally. You become a calm observer instead of a wounded participant. Emotional coldness also requires staying grounded in logic rather than emotion. A narcissist depends on emotional reactions because emotions are easier to manipulate. But when you switch to logic, clear boundaries, factual responses, or silence, they lose the ability to twist the narrative. Logic disrupts their emotional games. Silence destroys them even faster. Your indifference becomes louder than any argument you could ever give. Another part of going emotionally cold involves maintaining internal control. You may not feel calm inside at first, but you act calm externally. This teaches your nervous system to detach over time. Soon the emotional coldness is not an act. It is your natural response. You begin protecting your peace without effort. The narcissist who once believed they could trigger you anytime starts facing a version of you they do not recognize, stable, quiet, untouchable. As you maintain this emotional coldness, the narcissist begins experiencing something they rarely feel: insignificance. They sense that they no longer have a place in your emotional world. They don't see the reactions they used to feed on. They don't see you bending, apologizing, explaining, or chasing. They don't see you crumbling. Instead, they see someone they can no longer shake. And that realization is the beginning of their regret, because the one thing a narcissist cannot handle is losing access to someone they once controlled, someone whose emotions once revolved around them, someone who now looks at them and feels nothing. Setting boundaries is one of the most effective tools for protecting yourself from a narcissist, yet it is one of the hardest things to implement consistently. Narcissists thrive on breaking boundaries because boundaries limit their power. Every no you say, every limit you enforce, and every line you refuse to cross threatens their control. They are accustomed to bending reality, manipulating emotions, and exploiting your flexibility. But boundaries take away that flexibility, and with it, they lose a crucial part of their influence over you. Boundaries are not just physical. They are emotional, mental, and digital. Emotional boundaries mean you refuse to be dragged into arguments, guilt trips, or manipulations. Mental boundaries mean you decide what thoughts and beliefs you allow into your mind, refusing to internalize their criticism or blame. Digital boundaries mean controlling the access they have to you through messages, social media, or calls. Each type of boundary reduces the narcissist's ability to invade your life and manipulate your emotions. The first step in setting boundaries is clarity. You must know exactly what behaviors you will not tolerate and what responses are acceptable. Narcissists often test limits repeatedly, probing to see if your no really means no, or if it's just a suggestion they can ignore. The stronger your clarity, the more effective your boundaries. Ambiguity is their playground. Once they sense inconsistency or hesitation, they exploit it. But firm, unwavering boundaries communicate that you are no longer a malleable target. Consistency is equally crucial. A narcissist measures your boundaries over time, not in isolated moments. If you enforce limits only sometimes, or only when convenient, they will exploit the gaps. Every boundary you maintain without wavering strengthens your position and undermines theirs. It teaches them that you are not negotiable, that your emotions are not for sale, and that your life cannot be directed by their whims. Another aspect of boundary setting is the refusal to justify yourself excessively. Narcissists demand explanations to guilt or manipulate. Every explanation you give is another opportunity for them to argue, twist your words, or trap you emotionally. A simple, calm, and firm statement like, "This is my boundary, and it will not change," is enough. No justifications are needed. Justification often reopens the door you work to close. Boundaries are also a form of self-respect. They show a narcissist that you value your time, energy, and emotional well-being above their approval or attention. The more you demonstrate that your boundaries are inviolable, the more they feel the loss of control. Narcissists are not accustomed to dealing with people who protect themselves effectively. They see boundaries as resistance, and resistance triggers frustration, confusion, and ultimately, regret when they realize they can no longer manipulate you as easily. Setting boundaries requires preparation for pushback. Narcissists will resist your limits, test your resolve, and provoke reactions. They may guilt trip, threaten, or play the victim to see if you will fold. This is normal. Expect it. Their behavior is a reaction to losing the control they once had. The key is to remain calm, neutral, and firm. The moment you react emotionally, the boundary loses power. The moment you bend, the cycle of manipulation continues. Boundaries are a declaration of autonomy. By enforcing them, you show a narcissist that you are no longer available for their games. You show them that their tactics no longer affect your life. You reclaim the power they once stole. This is a subtle yet devastating shift in the dynamic because narcissists thrive on dependence. They cannot operate effectively when the other person is self-sufficient, grounded, and unyielding. Finally, boundaries create an environment where your growth is possible. Without clear limits, a narcissist's chaos seeps into every area of life, emotional, mental, and even professional. Boundaries give you space to rebuild your self-worth, focus on your goals, and protect your energy. They are not walls to hurt the narcissist. They are shields for your peace. And as you consistently maintain them, you begin to notice the subtle effects the narcissist's irritation, frustration, and confusion grow. They start realizing that the access they once had to your life, your time and your emotions is slipping, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. One of the most subtle and powerful ways to make a narcissist regret losing you is to focus on yourself quietly, intentionally, and consistently. Narcissists thrive on attention, control, and admiration. When they see someone who once fed their ego beginning to flourish independently, without needing validation or reacting to their manipulation, it unsettles them in ways nothing else can. Quiet growth is not about revenge, it's about reclaiming your life, proving your worth to yourself, and demonstrating that you are no longer defined by their influence. The key word here is quiet. Narcissists are experts at twisting information and taking credit for attention. So broadcasting your growth can backfire. Posting constant updates, bragging about achievements, or seeking approval through social media feeds their desire to monitor and manipulate. Growth is most effective when it's done privately, internally, and steadily. Every improvement you make, physical, emotional, mental, or professional, creates an invisible shift that only you fully control, and that the narcissist cannot influence. Self-improvement can take many forms. Emotional growth means learning to manage your reactions, protect your peace, and respond calmly instead of defensively. Mental growth involves acquiring knowledge, developing new skills, or shifting limiting beliefs. Physical growth includes improving your health, fitness, or appearance, not for their sake but for your own empowerment. Financial and professional growth involves gaining independence, setting goals, and creating stability that no one can disrupt. Each area of growth reduces their leverage and reminds them that you are no longer dependent. Quiet growth also involves repairing and strengthening your boundaries. By improving your emotional intelligence, you recognize manipulation attempts before they escalate. You no longer fall into guilt traps, love bomb cycles, or criticism spirals. You become more self-aware and less reactive, which is something a narcissist cannot tolerate. They rely on emotional chaos to maintain control. Calm, composed, and deliberate progress removes that chaos and leaves them powerless. Another critical element of quiet growth is building a support system. Narcissists isolate people to increase dependency and control. By surrounding yourself with trustworthy, positive, and supportive people, you strengthen your resilience and reduce the chances of their influence reaching you. These relationships validate your worth in ways that are authentic, not manipulative. They become the invisible armor that shields you from emotional attacks while helping you thrive. An overlooked aspect of this growth is self-confidence. Narcissists are drawn to insecurity because it's easier to manipulate. As you quietly grow, your confidence naturally increases. You no longer seek their approval, chase their attention, or justify your existence. Confidence, once internalized, radiates in subtle ways: your posture, your tone, your decisions, that narcissists notice and cannot control. This quiet display of self-assurance often triggers envy, frustration, and regret in someone who once believed they could dictate how you felt. Growth also allows you to focus on your passions, purpose, and long-term goals. Narcissists are usually short-term thinkers. They seek immediate gratification, validation, and control. When you channel your energy into meaningful pursuits, you create a life that is vibrant, engaging, and fulfilling. The narcissist can watch all they want, but they cannot participate or benefit. Every accomplishment, every small win, every positive change becomes a reminder that your life has moved on, and they are no longer the center of it. Perhaps most importantly, quiet growth demonstrates independence. The narcissist once had a role in shaping your emotions, thoughts, and priorities. By quietly improving yourself, you reclaim your autonomy. You become the person you were always capable of being, without permission, without explanation, and without their influence. This independence is the hardest thing for a narcissist to digest. They thrive on dependence, and your self-sufficiency removes their power entirely. As you continue to improve quietly, the narcissist experiences a subtle yet profound loss. They realize that their manipulations, criticisms, or control tactics no longer matter. Their ability to influence you has disappeared. Every step you take toward growth is a step away from them, a statement that their presence was never necessary for your success or happiness. And as they witness your transformation, even from a distance, they begin to sense the regret of losing access to someone who is now untouchable, empowered, and thriving without them. One of the most effective ways to make a narcissist regret losing you is to remove their access to your life, your time, and, most importantly, your attention. Narcissists survive on control, validation, and emotional energy, often referred to as supply. When they lose access to these sources, their sense of power diminishes, and they are forced to confront the reality that they no longer have influence over you. This shift is subtle but devastating for someone who thrives on dependency and manipulation. Access is more than just physical proximity. It includes emotional availability, constant communication, social media updates, shared routines, and even indirect attention through mutual connections. A narcissist watches for signals: how often you respond, how quickly you answer messages, whether you engage with their provocations, and how much of your life they can monitor. Each interaction becomes a form of supply, feeding their ego and reinforcing their control. Removing access cuts off this supply at the source. The first step in removing access is to establish firm boundaries regarding communication. Limit or eliminate unnecessary conversations. Avoid engaging in arguments, explanations, or justifications. Silence, when strategically applied, communicates more power than confrontation. A narcissist is accustomed to constant engagement and will often react strongly to the absence of it. The lack of response creates a vacuum that forces them to acknowledge they no longer control the narrative. Social media is another critical area to control. Narcissists often monitor updates, likes, comments, and posts to gauge your emotional state and determine whether they still have influence. Reducing your digital visibility, adjusting privacy settings, or limiting what you share online deprives them of this indirect access. Every update they can no longer track or manipulate chips away at the illusion that they have control over your life. Physical space is equally important. Minimizing contact, avoiding shared environments when possible, and prioritizing your own schedule over theirs prevents them from entering your life uninvited. Narcissists often attempt to impose themselves physically to regain a foothold, but creating distance denies them that opportunity. Every step you take to preserve your space reinforces the message that you are no longer available for manipulation or intrusion. Emotional detachment complements the removal of access. Even if contact is unavoidable, refusing to engage emotionally limits their ability to feed on your reactions. Responses should be minimal, neutral, and calm. Avoid revealing vulnerability, frustration, or anger. The less they can provoke, the less power they hold. Emotional coldness is not indifference. It is deliberate control over your energy, which becomes a silent but potent weapon against manipulation. Removing access also involves reclaiming your time. Narcissists often demand attention and prioritize their needs above yours. By consciously allocating your time to self-care, growth, and supportive relationships, you deny them the control they crave. Every hour spent focusing on your goals instead of responding to their attempts at influence strengthens your independence and reduces their impact. Time becomes a tool of liberation rather than a vector for manipulation. This strategy forces a narcissist to confront something they cannot easily handle: loss. They may initially attempt to regain access through coercion, guilt-tripping, or charm. They may test boundaries, create crises, or employ attention-seeking behaviors. But the consistent removal of access, coupled with emotional neutrality, disrupts their expectations. They begin to realize that their tactics no longer guarantee the reactions or control they once had. By removing access to your life, you create an environment where the narcissist cannot operate effectively. They can observe, they can speculate, but they cannot intervene, provoke, or dominate. Each boundary, each act of silence, and each moment of self-prioritization strips away their perceived power. This process is not about revenge. It is about self-preservation, empowerment, and reclaiming the autonomy that was once compromised. As the narcissist notices that the doors they once opened so easily are now firmly closed, they begin to sense a loss they cannot reverse, and their frustration, envy, and regret start to take root in ways that mere confrontation never could. The ultimate way to make a narcissist regret losing you is to live a life that doesn't include them, and, more importantly, doesn't need them. Narcissists feed on the illusion that they are indispensable. They thrive when they are the center of your attention, when your emotions revolve around them, and when your happiness feels contingent on their presence or approval. The moment you build a life that is fulfilling without them, you remove their power completely and trigger the kind of regret they cannot ignore. Living a life without a narcissist does not mean carrying resentment or focusing on them constantly. It means redirecting your energy toward yourself, your goals, and your well-being. It means waking up each day with purpose, rather than reacting to their manipulations or replaying past interactions in your mind. By prioritizing yourself and your dreams, you create a life that is vibrant, abundant, and emotionally independent. A life where the narcissist's influence no longer has a place. One of the key aspects of this strategy is pursuing your passions relentlessly. Narcissists are often consumed by their own egos, but you, by contrast, are free to explore your authentic interests. Whether it's career growth, creative endeavors, physical fitness, travel, education, or spiritual growth, dedicating yourself to meaningful pursuits demonstrates that your happiness does not require their presence. Every milestone you achieve is a subtle but powerful reminder of what they lost. Another important element is building a supportive network. Narcissists rely on isolation to maintain control. By surrounding yourself with people who genuinely care for you, who validate your worth without manipulation, you strengthen your independence and reinforce your sense of self. These connections become a mirror, reflecting your growth and progress in ways the narcissist can observe but cannot influence. Their envy grows not because they understand your happiness, but because they realize they are no longer indispensable. Financial and emotional independence are also critical. A narcissist thrives when they can dictate your decisions through dependency, whether financial, emotional, or social. The moment you take control of your resources and your emotional state, you remove their leverage. Every step you take towards self-sufficiency is a step away from their control, a step that demonstrates your autonomy and signals that their manipulation no longer works. Living a life without them also involves cultivating inner peace. Narcissists often thrive on drama, chaos, and conflict. When you remain calm, grounded, and unshakable, you deny them the emotional reactions they seek. They may attempt to provoke you, test your boundaries, or insert themselves back into your life. But if your life is centered on your stability and growth, their attempts fail. Your serenity becomes a silent statement of independence, a form of power that is invisible but undeniable. Self-confidence and self-respect are the foundation of this approach. Narcissists are accustomed to controlling people who doubt themselves. By demonstrating unwavering confidence and valuing your own boundaries, you show them that their influence is no longer effective. Confidence isn't loud or boastful. It's quiet, steady, and visible in your decisions, your energy, and your refusal to let their past presence dictate your present. Perhaps the most devastating element for the narcissist is your ability to thrive socially, emotionally, and professionally without them. Every success, every connection, every achievement highlights the reality they cannot accept. You were never dependent on them for validation, happiness, or fulfillment. They begin to feel the weight of their absence, not in your suffering, but in your flourishing. Ultimately, the most effective way to make a narcissist regret losing you is to stop giving them space in your mind and your life. Regret doesn't come from confrontation, revenge, or humiliation. It comes naturally when they see that you have moved on, healed, and created a life that is better without them. Your happiness, growth, and independence are the ultimate proof that their control was never necessary. When you live fully, unapologetically, and independently, the narcissist is left with nothing but the reality that they lost someone irreplaceable. They cannot influence your choices, your emotions, or your joy. And in that absence of control, they feel the kind of regret that no argument, no manipulation, and no plea could ever undo.